A man's virtue mostly flows from three separate sources: desire, emotion, and intelligence. Knowledge is a wise man's treasure, but beware of false doctrines, for they are even more dangerous than ignorance. Forget all you know, or think you know. Abandon the hunger for power and enforce decrees. Look inward, where the deepest rivers flow. There, you'll find the currents of eternity. And as always, my friends, welcome to my mania. Hey, what's happening, everybody? It's Jake Johnson here, and you're watching Untethered live stream coming to you straight from the internet, right out of my brain. We are going to have us one hell of a conversation tonight. We are going to talk about the Great Reset. We're going to talk about Event 201. We're going to talk about the Great Mouse Utopia experiments, and pretty much anything else you want to talk about. What a great day it is. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. It's that time of year again. It's the time where you're supposed to get together with your family and argue about politics. And I mean, enjoy each other's company and eat turkey. So, leave it to Uncle Jake to give you a non-political, non-interpretive podcast for the evening. How's everybody doing? Anybody here yet? Is it just me? No, there's people here. What's up, Great Sky Troll? You're watching Terra Nova, huh? Drinking some alcohol? That's a good Thanksgiving pastime. I have been working on my truck for the last 2 days. Finally got my brakes fixed and my transmission went out. So, there's that. Fun. But I got the permit today to get my electricity turned back on at my house. So I'll be shortly, I think Monday, I'll be heading back over there. A little scratchy today. A little pollen in the air or something. As you can see, I've got the Constitution of the United States of America and the amendments playing in the background, just for those of you who may question my integrity or the meaning behind the things we're going to talk about tonight. I'm just kind of shooting the breeze till everybody gets here. Namely, the guy who wanted to talk about this subject, Kevin. He asked that we discuss the coming of the Great Reset, and I thought, well, that's a good subject. I'll look into that. And boy, did I fall down a rabbit hole. We got some pretty interesting things happening in this world. Right now, it's happening openly in Canada and in Europe, coming to a city near you, guaranteed. And then with a little polishing off of the Great Mouse Utopia experiments, I'll let you know how this whole thing ends up, how it turns out in the end. Explain the nature of society and what happens when you stuff them in little boxes. The natural progression of a society, as it were. There's only so many ways you can do this whole society thing. There's only one way you can do it correctly. And we have stopped doing that about 1984. It's about when we started stopping. Ironically enough, there's a book called 1984 that describes exactly what we're going through. In great detail, actually. Though it is a fictional book, it hits the nail on the head more often than not. And it's ironic that it started at about 1984. That's when the downhill decline began. And slowly through the 90s, it crept over to the edge of the cliff. And in 2000, it got right up to the edge and was peering over. 2001, it's teetering back and forth. And then 2016, it plunged off into the abyss. And we've been free falling ever since. And that is just the way it goes. I thought about just reading the Constitution for this podcast, because I'm sure that as many people like to complain about what's going on in this world, and as many people as has an opinion about the way things are going, I doubt very few of them have ever actually read the Constitution and the amendments all the way through and understand their meaning. I decided against that because it's a long document and it's boring. So I decided to just play it right here instead. And you can read it if you want to. It's there. It's just a friendly neighborhood service. There's the document that we live by. If you want to know what's in it, the words are there for your reading. And it's going slow, so you ought to be able to keep up with it. Here comes somebody. If you're just joining us, we're getting ready to get into the discussion about the Great Reset and the Event 201 and the Great Mouse Experiments. And you've got the Constitution right here for your pleasure, should you decide to delve into what it means. In earlier news, I got the permits for my electricity today, so I can get my building inspected and get back into my house starting Monday. That's when the inspector shows up. I'll get that taken care of, and then I'll begin the transit to move back into my home. Some of you may know that I've got 2 vehicles and they're both down. Well, I worked on my truck for the last 2 days, replaced all the rotors and calipers, and cranked it up, and the transmission died. There's one thing right after another. So I'm going to have to tow my truck to my house and save up and buy me a new transmission, I guess. I don't know. I haven't actually looked into it yet. It may just have a flywheel, but it definitely won't go in gear, whatever it is. I guess that's what happens when you let a truck sit for a year and drive your bike. There's only one of me and 2 of them, so guess which one gets the most attention? The old Harley. What else? I think they're starting after the holidays. They're going to start construction on the building that I'm in at the moment. I don't know if that's after Thanksgiving or after Christmas. I don't know which. They said holidays, so I assume Thanksgiving, because it's a little while still to Christmas. But you never know. It could happen. But I think Tuesday I should be staying in my house, if everything goes according to plan and nothing is, caught on fire or been chewed through by rats at my house. If all the wiring is intact and I don't have to do any work there, I'll be able to just schmooze right on in. It's a lovely day outside today. It was nice and cool, but it wasn't cold. Wasn't too hot. Didn't rain. No flooding, by the way. The water was right. I've got a river behind my house, and the water was right up to the dirt. I mean, it was way over where it's supposed to be at. I joked and said if anybody walked by and tripped and spilled a cup of water, it would flood. It'd crest and flood. It was that close. But I don't think it flooded, so we're good. Didn't lose another house. That'll be the 4th time I've flooded there, if it happened, which it didn't, so I'm grateful for that. And just getting my little ducks in a row and trying to keep busy. It's all you can ask for, really. Where's my April at? I hadn't seen April yet. She's usually the first one here. I see Great Sky Troll, but I think he's watching TV and ain't paying attention to me. Which ain't a bad idea. Hell, I might do that. Let's go to the TV channel. Bow. Let's start with Event 201.
Hello, everyone. I'm Anita Cicero, Deputy Director of the Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security. And today I will be your Master of Ceremonies for Event 201. On behalf of our center and our partners, the World Economic Forum and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, I'd like to extend a very warm welcome to our audience here in New York, as well.
Notice that this is the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation paying for a portion of this. That's interesting since they have their hand in the vaccine industry as well. It's very important to point that out because they're a big player in what's going on in our country today.
As well as our larger virtual audience participating online today. The goal of the Event 201 exercise is to illustrate the potential consequences of a pandemic and the kinds of...
The goal of Event 201 is a war game to plan out a pandemic and figure out how all the particulars will work before you do it. Since this occurred in 2019, actually 2018, somewhere in that area, and then in 2020 we had a pandemic. And it's very similar, very eerie.
Societal and economic challenges it would pose. The scenario also highlights the very critical role that global business and public-private partnerships play in preparing for and responding to pandemics. Today's scenario is going to simulate meetings of a multi-stakeholder group called the Pandemic Emergency Board. This board has been urgently convened by the World Economic Forum, and Johns Hopkins has been asked to moderate the board meetings and provide expertise during the board's deliberations.
So this is an all-hands-on-deck operation. It's not a small thing. It wouldn't surprise me if you didn't hear about it when it was going on, because they kept it real hush-hush. But believe me when I tell you that all the major players were involved in this event, and it was to decide what to do in case of a pandemic. Oddly enough, we just happen to have one.
The mission of the Pandemic Emergency Board is to provide recommendations to deal with the major global challenges arising in response to an unfolding pandemic.
Oh, don't worry, Great Sky Troll. I don't take vaccines. I believe in the 3, mumps, measles, and rubella, and that's it. Now, if I go to China, or if I go to India or Egypt, I might take a booster for malaria or something like that. But no way am I taking vaccines. They're full of mercury and all kinds of crazy stuff. Oh, we're going to get into it today. I was asked to look into this great reset that's going on. And I can't very well do that without laying the groundwork of why it's happening in the first place. And the reason it's happening, all these things have been being put into place since Obama was in office. And this is just the biggest, the most recent connection back to the past that I can find. And we're going to go through, I don't know if we're going to watch this whole video or not, but we're definitely going to get the idea of what's going on here.
The board is comprised of highly experienced leaders from business, public health, and civil society. The board's recommendations are aimed at top decision makers in national governments, global business, and international organizations. In this scenario, Tom Inglesby, the director of the Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security, will be chairing the board and serving.
No, please do interrupt. I want your thoughts as well as mine. I don't know if this video is going to show who all was at this event or not, but the who's who of who was in this room during this event and who was participating is staggering. You would not believe the people that are involved in this. And this is just natural everyday goings on in the United States right here in front of God and everybody. And Canada is kind of the proving ground for it. They're doing the Great Reset in open conversation in Canada right now. Justin Trudeau was talking about it yesterday. So that's coming this way, believe it.
As the moderator for its discussions. Today's exercise.
This occurred in 2018, I believe. Let's see. See if it give the date. Well, it was posted in 2019, but I believe it occurred, let's see, partnership. Oh, it was October 18th, 2019 when they had this War Games in New York City.
Will simulate 4 meetings of the Pandemic Emergency Board, and each meeting will be devoted to one key topic. Each meeting will start with a video and a briefing that will provide the information needed for the board members to engage. Please note, this is not a test of any particular person, organization, or nation. The participants are all playing as themselves. That is, senior business executives, NGO leaders, and government officials. They're not expected to be pandemic experts.
Yes, so do I. But best laid plans of mice and men, if you know what I mean. However, this government that we have has plans also, and they are not for our benefit. The way this all works out in the end, when I get to the mouse utopia experiments, you'll understand what they're trying to do with society. They're pushing it in that direction. The whole purpose is to collapse the world economy and to collapse all of the universal governments and make one government over the whole earth. One leader, one elite class. And I don't have any idea how long that'll take. It may be the next 50 or 100 years, but that's definitely the direction they're moving in. And this is part of the beginning of it.
We've really asked them to participate based on their own expertise and their best professional judgment. With the exception of Tom Inglesby, none of the participants know any of the details about how the exercise will unfold. The Event 201 scenario is fictional, but it's based on public...
Yeah, I'm not going to go into Fauci today because that's a whole can of worms all by itself. That guy is bad news. Interestingly enough, the word Fauci means in Greece the jaw or the mouthpiece. And I have this whole theory about names, you know, like Bernie Madoff is the guy that stole all that money. You know what I mean? Or the woman who turned coat on Melania Trump. Her name signified what she was doing. Well, Fauci, the mouthpiece, that guy's doing a bunch of this for the elites. He's not necessarily telling us the truth, and he hasn't.
Public health principles, epidemiologic modeling, and assessment of past outbreaks. In other words, we've created a pandemic that could realistically occur. And for those interested in our...
Yeah, you created a pandemic, all right. Did you know that the United States and England own the patent to COVID-19 virus? And they own a patent that is open-ended. And I believe Bill Gates has the rights to the patent for the vaccine for COVID-19. So that's just odd that she said that out loud.
Assumptions, we will have a lot of the background research of the scenario publicly available on our Event 201 website at the conclusion of the exercise. The policy discussions, the challenges to be discussed in this exercise represent controversial, high-stakes issues that would require high-level input from business and government leaders. So just a few housekeeping notes before we get started. For our in-person audience, please do silence all your electronic devices, but you may tweet at #event201. We're going to have a 15-minute break.
Yeah, don't interrupt us, but be sure to get the word out because we want everybody to know about this. Oddly enough, there wasn't a whole lot of tweeting going on during this. We didn't hear about Event 201 until long after it had happened.
In the middle of the exercise, so please try to confine your calls and work at that time. Because the event is being video recorded and live streamed, we ask that you remain quiet as much as possible and avoid moving around during the exercise. The exercise is going to end at 12:30, and there'll be a luncheon in the cotillion room to which you are all invited. As you know, there's also an online virtual Event 201 exercise that's happening simultaneously. And for those of you online, and I understand there are hundreds of you, you will be seeing the same news videos and briefings as we do here in New York.
So in other words, this is an all-out war games, and it's played out across the whole country. Those 200 people that she's talking about that are online, they are selected people. It's not just you and me. Notice they don't give out the website. What it is people that are placed in certain places to respond accordingly to the news that comes out. They're going to fake a pandemic, and they're going to fake news articles and broadcasts, and they're going to fake how they respond to it, and the other people are going to respond in kind. It's a war game. That's what it is. There's no other way to see it.
But you will engage in your own online discussion in place of watching the discussions of the players here in the room. The topics and the topics and the pacing of the deliberations will be the same, both online and in the room. So, as you can see on this slide, we have an outstanding group of global leaders playing the role of the Pandemic Emergency Board members here in New York. And with that, let's welcome our participants and invite them into the room. Tom Inglesby from Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security, LaToya Abbott, Marriott International, Sophia Borges, UN Foundation, Brad Conant,
Is that better?
Henry Schein.
Did it stop crackling? Good. I've got a bad cord or something. I need to get another mic cable. It seems like every time I bump it, it'll go crackling on me. But thank you for telling me. Is this meeting too loud? The video, is it too loud or is it loud enough?
Chris Elias, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Tim Evans, formerly of the World Bank.
Bill and Gates Foundation.
George
World
Gao
Bank.
from China CDC.
China CDC.
Averill Haines, former Deputy U.S. National Security Advisor. Jane Hulton, ANZ Bank, and former secretaries of both the Department of Health and Finance in Australia.
Funny that how many banks are involved in this. What do you think a bank has to do with an economic downturn due to a pandemic?
Matthew Harrington from Edelman. Martin Knuckle from Lufthansa Group. Eduardo Martinez, UPS Foundation. Stephen Red from
UPS.
USCDC. Adrian Thomas from Johnson & Johnson. And Hasti Taghi from NBC Universal Media. And Lavin Theroux from the Monetary Authority of Singapore.
Imagine that.
Welcome. And before we begin the exercise, I also want to introduce Ryan Morhard, who's lead of the Global Health Security Group at the World Economic Forum, and he will say a few words.
And notice that they don't tell you who's the 200 people on the internet that are participating in this war game. They're not going to mention who those people are. I don't think they are anyway. But just think about the CDC from 3 different countries or 4 different countries, about 8 different banks, and then other leaders involved in high places that have nothing to do with people who live in everyday world, everyday society. Notice who was not at that meeting, like the Salvation Army or FEMA or anybody who would respond in case of a pandemic. The military, the U.S. government.
Right.
I'm just saying. That's
Thank
right.
you, Anita. And good morning and welcome again on behalf of the Center for Health Security, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and the World Economic Forum.
Oh.
Welcome to Event 201. 201. Throughout our session today, I hope that number will represent two dimensions of our work to strengthen global health security. First, today, there are 200 epidemic events every year, and it hasn't always been this way. The number is increasing, driven by globalization, climate change, urbanization, deforestation, and other trends of our modern world. In other words, we're in a new era of epidemic risk.
What you been thinking about? I've been thinking too. Thinking that we're up the creek without a paddle. If Biden bought this election, then Trump probably bought 216. I wouldn't doubt that at all. I've never once said that the Republicans didn't cheat. I don't think Trump did it on purpose. I don't think he knew about it. But I think that all elections are fixed in one way or another. They've been using the same software for 10 years. And it was developed in Venezuela under Hugo Chavez. I don't trust anybody. Look, Donald Trump absolutely was trying to make America a better place to live. He was trying to run it like a business, not like a country. He was trying to mainstay profits, make that the focal so that people would prosper. He wanted a smaller government. He wanted you to be able to make your own decisions. That is completely opposite from what the Republicans and the Democrats want. Donald Trump is not a Republican. He just ran under the Republican ticket. However, once they realized, see, it ain't supposed to happen that we, the people, actually get to vote and then our views be reflected in who wins. That's not actually supposed to happen. That's just something they tell us to make us feel better. But in 2016, it actually happened, and they panicked. And ever since, Republicans and Democrats both have been trying to get rid of Donald Trump. And they've made him a hated figure among certain people. The reason they did that is because he's actually trying to put the power back in the people's hands. Now, he hasn't been successful at that because they've stopped him at every turn. But he's tried. And whether he wins or loses now, he's probably the best president we've ever had as far as getting things done. Because he did get a lot accomplished. He just didn't get the things accomplished that he wanted to get accomplished. That we wanted him to get accomplished. You think he got 40,000 votes? I never even heard his name mentioned. All I ever heard him refer to him as the other candidate, him and Jorgensen. But no, the votes are definitely screwy. They always have been.
And the second dimension is that one of these days, one of these epidemic events will be a pandemic, a fast-moving pandemic. And mitigating risk and impact of that pandemic will require an all-hands-on-deck approach.
Huh.
And we know from past responses that public-private cooperation will be essential. We also know from these responses that there are some bright spots when it comes to public-private cooperation, but some real critical challenges remain. But there's every reason for us to work together to address.
He's got a lot in common with Andrew too. Can't think of the guy's name right now. The president, the one that got in a dueling match, took the pistol out of the guy's hand and beat him with a stick. Andrew Jackson. He's got a lot in common with him. And he's got a lot in common with Cyrus the king, because he's doing basically the same thing Cyrus the king did in the Bible. Matter of fact, I'm not the only one that thinks that, because they've actually got a coin in Jerusalem that has Trump's face on it and Cyrus the king's face on it and the temple on the back. So apparently even the Jews think that he's a lot like Cyrus the king. So I guess we'll just have to see if that holds true and he pulls it out. If he wins this election, no question about it, it's a miracle. If he wins this election, the only way he could have is if God put him in office, because the world definitely does not want him in office. And I mean all the world. Yep, a lot of anti-bank activities, a lot of putting the power back in the people's hands and taking it out of the elite's hands. They didn't like that at all. So that's why they've tried to kill him. I mean, metaphorically speaking, try to ruin his character and all that. Try to get him arrested for something. I mean, they've been looking for something wrong. I bet he's the most vetted person in the world. You could probably trust Donald Trump with your babies, because you know that every alphabet agency in existence has went overtime looking into him, trying to find something to arrest him on. He is probably the cleanest person on earth. I've probably committed more crimes than he has. Also, an interesting note, he is the only president that we have ever had in our lifetimes that did not get us into a war. He's the only president in our lifetime that brought troops back from a war. A war that they weren't born when it started, some of them. Some of the people in Afghanistan were not born when that war started. That's pretty amazing. And I think in 50 years, after all the hatred dies down, I think history will probably regard Trump as one of the best presidents in American history, because he did a lot of things. He should, by all rights, have like 5 Nobel Peace Prizes. He's the only president that has ever opened a dialogue with North Korea that didn't involve fighting. He's the only president that communicated with all the world's dictators openly and fairly and allowed them to speak and come to the table. He's the only American president we've ever had that didn't start a war, in our lifetimes anyway. And Dow Jones has broken the record, has hit the ceiling 43 times in the last 4 years, more so than any time in history, and it has broken the record 9 times this year. Meaning that during a pandemic, when the whole country is shut down, Donald Trump's economy managed to come out on top and break records 9 times. That's amazing. You've never heard of anything like that before. It damn sure didn't happen under Obama's watch or anybody else's. It didn't even happen under Reagan's watch, and Reagan was a hell of a president. Albeit he was screwed up in a lot of things that he probably shouldn't have been involved in, but that's the nature of how this government works. And when Clinton got in office, he opened up the world to where we could see a little more of it. We found out about the cocaine being flown into Mena, Arkansas, and the Iran-Contra soldiers being trained there. And we found out that the poppy fields in Afghanistan is basically what funds this country and several other countries. And that's the sale of heroin, by the way, in case you didn't know. That's why we have military American soldiers guarding poppy fields in Afghanistan, because we're protecting the drug trade that funds us. A lot of people won't tell you that, but that's the truth, and they've been doing it a long time. So you can't really fault any particular president for that, because they inherited that from the last president. And once you get in office, I imagine they tell you some things you didn't know before you got in there. And I imagine that's why all of the president's hairs usually turn white, and they usually look 35 years older when they leave office after 4 years, because they learn a bunch of things that the average American don't know. Things like how the country is paid for. Things like they plan pandemics right out in the open in public.
These challenges. For one, it turns out that at $570 billion annualized, the annualized risk posed by pandemics is on par and rivals with climate change, which means that the pandemic risk to lives and livelihoods is at a level that governments and the world's biggest businesses can no longer afford to ignore. And we are counting on this conversation today to inform our work together to improve our collective preparedness and to protect lives and livelihoods from pandemics. And to provide further context, I'm very pleased to introduce a short video now from Dr. Mike Ryan, the Executive Director at WHO and the head of WHO's emergency program. So with that,
Finally, we begin to get into it now. Tired of people talking. Let's get to business. See what you're doing.
Turn to a video.
Greetings, distinguished guests, and thank you for this opportunity to say a few words at this year's event 201, the high-level simulation exercise for pandemic preparedness and response, hosted by Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security, the World Economic Forum, and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Unfortunately, I was not able to join you today. I'm involved in the IHR Emergency Committee for Ebola, but I had hoped to be in the room with you, because the issues you will be dealing with over the next hours may be tabletop exercises today, but they address real and critical threats which we at WHO take very seriously.
I bet you do take it seriously, because you're planning on doing it in 2020. 201.
Without a question, epidemic risk has become a global strategic concern. I don't think we've ever been in a situation where we have had to respond to so many health emergencies at once. This is a new normal. I don't expect the frequency of these epidemics to reduce, and in fact,
Pay close attention to the phrases that they use. It's like a brainwashing technique. The new normal, he just said. Now, you've been hearing that on the news for the past month. Every time you turn around, somebody's saying the new normal. Pay very close attention to how they phrase things. These are called devices. They are literary devices designed to cause you to think a certain way. It's wizardry at its finest.
vulnerabilities all over the world, developed and developing countries, have increased, not decreased, driven by many, many factors, mainly through human behaviour, economic development, population density, and many others. The scenario you will be presented with this morning could easily become one a shared reality one day. I fully expect that we will be confronted by a fast-moving, highly lethal pandemic of a respiratory pathogen.
Keep in mind, this was a year before it happened.
Question is, are we prepared to globally respond to the next major pandemic event?
No.
Are we ready to cooperate and perform across countries and across sectors
No.
to face such a threat? Have we established the surveillance and risk assessment systems, the communication tools, the supply chains, and the business continuity plans that will be needed, not only to protect health in a major epidemic or pandemic, but to protect economic development, to protect political and social systems?
No.
Do we collectively drive innovation enough to face the evolving global threats which we're anticipating? The nature of pandemics is that many countries will be affected at the same time. This is particularly true with the respiratory pathogen, as they are often transmitted by asymptomatic persons.
China.
They spread fast. In 2009, the pandemic virus reached all continents in less than 9 weeks. WHO's priorities are to establish...
Notice that he said in 2009, the pandemic, quote unquote, reached all continents in less than 9 weeks. What pandemic was that, you may ask? SARS, COVID-18.
A minimum capacity to detect and respond in each country around the world, to develop global strategies for the containment and control of individual disease threats, and develop global mechanisms to ensure cross-sectoral and multinational, multilateral coordination. Innovation and partnership across all sectors are needed, including joint strategies between global health leaders and the drivers of travel, communication, data technology industries. WHO is working at all levels through a variety of partnerships to strengthen national and regional preparedness, such as GORN, the Global Outbreak Alert and Response Network. Through the PIP framework, adopted by WHO member states in 2011, WHO has secured 400 million vaccine doses for influenza, 10 million antiviral treatments and 250,000 diagnostic kits for the next pandemic. We have completed external evaluations of surveillance and response systems in over 100 countries.
Notice that he will not mention a vaccine for SARS. COVID-19 is a bat-like SARS COVID nominal virus, which means it is the common cold attached to a SARS bat-like virus housed inside of the mucous membrane from the AIDS virus, which allows it to transmit quickly. No, you don't get AIDS if you get COVID, but what I'm saying is it uses the infiltration method in order to get into the body from the AIDS virus. And it is the common cold virus that is modified into COVID-19 with the bat-like SARS. And they never mentioned SARS and how to treat it. They never did come up with a vaccine for it back when we got SARS the first time. That was the test run, the first SARS outbreak.
Carried out more than 50 simulation exercises at country level, looking for vulnerabilities and weaknesses in national systems. This voluntary, collaborative, multi-sectoral process helps countries to assess their capacities and identifies the most critical gaps within their health systems in order to prioritise opportunities for enhanced preparedness and response. The Pandemic Supply Chain Network, part of the Epidemic Readiness Accelerator, which is a project of the World Economic Forum in partnership with many, including WHO. It's a public-private collaboration to develop a globally connected supply chain that can support health emergency operations during a pandemic. Stakeholders consist of product manufacturers to logistics providers, distributors and UN partners, including ourselves. Michael Griffin is WHO's focal point for the Pandemic Supply Chain Network, and he is there with you this week. Constant innovation and the use of cutting-edge technology is key to pandemic preparedness. In order to pool data and analytics at a global scale for disease prevention, the EpiBrain initiative, a global data ecosystem, aims to build a collaboration of big data networks to understand and predict epidemics. It supports data science, innovation for outbreak preparedness and response. Despite this progress, there is still much to be done. Cross-sectoral simulation exercises, such as the one you will be experiencing today, contribute to a better understanding of the critical gaps, the cooperation required from global businesses, response decisions required from government and public health leaders to minimise large-scale economic and societal consequences of a severe pandemic. I wish you the best of luck, and we are looking forward to working with each of you to strengthen pandemic preparedness in the future.
All right, here we go. We're getting ready to start the exercise right now. This is the beginning of the war game where they fake a pandemic outbreak for the purposes of seeing how it happens.
Thank you.
And our thanks to Dr. Ryan. And with that, here in New York and online, welcome to Event 201.
It began in healthy-looking pigs, months, perhaps years ago. A new coronavirus spread.
Imagine that, a coronavirus like COVID-19, a year before it happened. But in bats, not pigs, but in a wet market nonetheless.
Silently within herds. Gradually, farmers started getting sick. Infected people got a respiratory illness with symptoms ranging from mild flu-like signs to severe pneumonia. The sickest required intensive care, many.
Hey, April, how are you doing? I'm glad you made it. What we're doing is we're watching an event that happened in 2018, 2019 called Event 201, where they did a war games causing a fake pandemic so that they could find out all the details. This is in response to Kevin asking me to look into the Great Reset, but this is how the Great Reset starts. So we're going to go through a few things during this podcast, this being the first, and happy Thanksgiving to you too. But what you're watching is not real news. This is a fake pandemic. It involves the world leaders of whom you wouldn't believe who are there, and 200 online participants who are responding in kind as if it were actually happening. So what you're watching is not real news. This is fake. But it is a war game that we did right here in America, in New York City, a year ago before the pandemic. And look at how many things they got correct.
Died. At first, the spread was limited to those with close contacts, healthcare personnel, co-workers, and families.
There's the
But
masks.
now, it's spreading rapidly throughout local communities. International travel has turned local epidemics into a pandemic spanning the globe. Just 3 months ago, CAPS started in South America, but has now reached several countries, with more than 30,000 cases and nearly 2,000 deaths.
Notice that they're not going to say it came from China. In this war games, it comes from South America, from pigs. But in reality, it came from China and bats. But it is the coronavirus nonetheless.
Good morning, and thank you all for being part of this Pandemic Emergency Board. We're at the start of what's looking like it will be a severe pandemic. And there are problems emerging that can only be solved by global business and governments working together. The global community has been working to respond to this pandemic since its recognition, but as health and economic impacts have become more severe, the World Economic Forum has convened this board because of your combined expertise, your backgrounds, and your global voice. We will need all of you to help us respond to urgent policy crises that are emerging. The purpose of this board is to advise leaders in national governments, global business, and international organizations on the response to the pandemic, particularly focused on international problems that require collaboration between business and government. Your recommendations will be critical and will be promulgated and communicated broadly at the end of this meeting. On the left screen, as we have this meeting, you will find a dashboard of information about the pandemic that will help us in our conversations. As important background for this discussion, we want to start the meeting by viewing this news story that just aired on Global News Network.
Continuing our coverage of the newly discovered CAPS disease and the scope of its deadly outbreaks, there are now more than 30,000 reported cases. Experts warn
No,
this
is a war game that is put on by our government. This actually took place in 2018 or 2019, somewhere in that area. And they actually put on a war game where they simulated an attack of a pandemic so that they could get in order all of the things that they were going to do to respond to it and train people. That was the guise. But what they were really doing was planning it. Event 201 was planning a pandemic. And now we're experiencing a pandemic that follows all of the rules that they set up back then. Right? Now, this is a real event, but what you're watching is not real news. These were filmed for the purposes of the war games. So just keep that in mind.
It could be just the beginning of a global problem. GNN science reporters have produced a video about what we know so far about CAPS, the virus, the outbreak, and the resulting chaos.
CAPS is a novel coronavirus related to those viruses that caused the frightening SARS epidemic in 2003 and the deadly MERS outbreaks in recent years.
CAPS, not COVID. Same thing, though.
Scientists think each infected person in turn infects on average 2 more people. This disease is proving more transmissible than SARS or MERS and about as contagious as influenza.
Imagine that.
Essentially, the cumulative number of cases is doubling every week. At this rate, we can expect to see 16 times as many cases in a month unless we find a way to interrupt transmission. The virus appears to be spreading rapidly in densely populated and impoverished neighborhoods in some megacities in South America. CAPS is a serious respiratory disease. More than half of the recognized cases have required hospital care, creating a huge strain on healthcare systems. The fatality rate is about 10%.
10%. 10%. COVID-19 right now is at 0.359%. That is less than 1%. It's a little more than 0, but it's not quite 1%. They're projecting it to be 10%. That's like a quarter of America dying. That's like bodies piled up in the streets. 10%. That's ridiculous.
Comparison, CAPS is about as lethal as SARS and 2 to 4 times more lethal than the 1918 influenza pandemic.
I bet it is about as lethal as SARS. It is SARS. COVID-19 is the coronavirus, which is the common cold, wrapped in bat-like SARS and dipped in the AIDS virus so that it'll get in your system fast. That's exactly what COVID-19 is.
The worst pandemic on record. Even so, some people only exhibit mild flu-like symptoms, not requiring treatment in a hospital. Alarmingly, those people are able to walk around and spread.
How did I get this? I did my research. This was a public event. You didn't hear about it because they didn't want you to hear about it, but it was public. And if you didn't know that it was happening, you could look into it and see what was going on. This happened in New York City a year before coronavirus happened. So, I mean, it's out there. Look it up. Event 201 is what it's called. That's how I got it. I did research. Remember Kevin asking me to look into the Great Reset last podcast? This is the beginning of the Great Reset. This is the reason for it. This is what's going to cause us, if they manage to pull it off, to go into a one-world government and a one-world monetary system. In the long run, they're going to reset society. That's what they're trying to do.
The virus, not realizing they are doing so. Even worse, international travelers have been arriving at their destinations symptom-free, but within a matter of hours, becoming ill. Travel-related cases have blossomed into outbreaks in a number of locations and have quickly grown faster than health authorities could respond and contain them. In other places, physicians have quickly recognized the symptoms of CAPS and have been able to isolate infected individuals and avoid an outbreak, for now. Global public health experts are very concerned about this disease. Because it appears the virus is readily transmitted through the air from person to person, essentially all people are susceptible.
There's your masks.
Experts agree unless it is quickly controlled, it could lead to a severe pandemic, an outbreak that circles the globe and affects people everywhere.
Remember on the news when they said they had no idea that this was going to happen, that they didn't think it would ever get out of China, let alone go across the whole world? Remember the beginnings of this, what they were talking about on the news back in March and April? Well, they planned the whole thing right here in New York City, and they knew full well that it would do that very thing. That's the scenario that we're playing out here in this war game. The exact scenario that occurred, that is happening right now. They will even get into lockdowns and masks and all of that stuff too.
Models developed by leading public health authorities indicate a CAPS pandemic could lead to an outcome worse than the 1918 influenza, which killed 50 to 100 million people worldwide. Given
Oh,
the
yeah.
global population is 4 times larger than it was in 1918, if these models prove accurate, we could be looking at hundreds of millions of deaths over the next year or two.
Okay, now we're going to get a briefing on the numbers and distribution of cases by Dr. Caitlin Rivers.
As you've just heard, the outbreak is very worrisome. The vast majority of cases are occurring in Brazil and other South American countries. However, as you can see on the screen, there have been some spread to Portugal, the continental United States, and mainland China. Our models project that with continued spread to Latin America and predicted spread to additional countries, we could be looking at double the number of cases in 1 week and 16 times as many in a month if we are not able to stop the spread. That would be on the order of 500,000 cases, and it would continue to rise.
H1N1 was the first test run of this whole pandemic thing. So was the SARS virus back in 2003. So was the MERS virus. All of these are man-made viruses. Do you remember H1N1, how they said that it was a brand new strain of the flu? Do you remember that? How they had never seen anything like it before? Remember? I want you to get the complete works of Sherlock Holmes and read that book, because one of the cases in Sherlock Holmes, which was written in the 1800s, mentions H1N1 while they're talking about Sherlock Holmes. In the book, they mention H1N1, which is the flu virus. They've known about H1N1 since the beginning of medicine. H1N1 was 1 degree off of the Spanish flu that killed so many people. It was right there in that mutation strain. It was basically the same virus. It was just a little bit different. I think it was named something else, like H3N1 or something. I don't remember exactly what the numbers were, but it was right there in the same strain, the Spanish flu, which came from Spain. This could be called the China flu because it came from China.
Rise exponentially. In 3 months, we could be approaching 10 million cases. We are also tracking financial markets as an indicator of the economic impacts of caps. While markets are down worldwide in the past couple of weeks, they are still positive for the year.
Thank you, Dr. Rivers. The first emerging policy crisis for which we need this board's recommendations regards global allocation and distribution of medical countermeasures. And by medical countermeasures, we mean vaccines, drugs, and diagnostics and other medical supplies to help us combat the CAPS pandemic. I know we would all agree that if we had a vaccine in hand for CAPS, it'd be a game changer. But
well, never fear, Bill and Melinda Gates are funding portion of this 201 event, and they're working hard on a vaccine for you in real life.
Leading vaccine experts say a vaccine in the near term is highly unlikely. But there is an antiviral that does look like it will work. And to understand that better, we're going to watch one more clip here.
Yep.
Continuing our CAPS disease coverage and possible solutions, I'm joined by immunologist Dr. Yubani Bello and Dr. EwwEwwG,
Listen
an
to what these people
epidemiologist,
say.
both highly respected in their fields. Let's get right to it. Why are people saying a vaccine for the CAPS virus is not likely in the near term?
Researchers are working on a vaccine, and we have viable leads, but it's complicated. We have known about CAPS-like viruses in animals and people for decades, but have not been successful at developing a licensed vaccine. And sure, there are new technologies that may help, but it's going to be difficult. I am not optimistic about having a vaccine in time to be relevant during this pandemic. Even if we discover a good vaccine candidate, we're starting from scratch, and it takes time to test safety and efficacy, typically years. So even if testing moves quickly, global manufacturing will still need to be established. Again, multiple hurdles.
We simply cannot rely on these old timelines and processes. This is a crisis. We have to move beyond these issues. It may be complicated, difficult, but if we dedicate all available resources, this can happen. Also, keep in mind.
Let me translate. All available resources means all of your money. What they're saying is, we can't rely on old medicine. We've got to make new medicine, so we need all your money. Give us all your money and give us all the control, and we'll get to work on it for you. That's what they're saying here.
We need effective treatments sooner rather than later. Extranavir is an antiviral drug. Scientists have told me this could be effective. We need to start treating people immediately.
Extranavir sounds incredibly close to remdesivir, which is a treatment for COVID-19.
While I agree Extranavir does look promising, it's currently used for treating HIV. However, it's not manufactured on the scale needed for treating this many people. And will we just stop using it for HIV treatment? How will we get this drug in the quantities needed? Who decides?
The fact that this Extranavir is an HIV treatment is kind of like hydroxychloroquine being a treatment for malaria. But they use that to treat COVID-19 also. So they've got two different things going on here. They've got a connection to remdesivir, and they've got a connection to hydroxychloroquine. And they're calling it Extranavir. It's probably because of the nasty stuff man has done with animals also. Well, yeah, but you got to understand that this virus was produced in a laboratory, and the reason it was produced was on purpose to let it out into the public. They took a relatively harmless virus and ramped it up so that it would be more harmful, and then they released it into the population so that they could gain control. Why do you think all of these lockdowns are being mandatory now? Lockdowns don't work. Even the World Health Organization has said that lockdowns are not useful. Yet they're doing it. Why are they doing it? Because they can control you when you're locked in your house. Because they're getting ready to turn on the Great Reset, and they're going to require everybody to be locked down so that nobody starts a war to stop them from doing the Great Reset. You see what I'm saying? It's all about control. This is a very carefully constructed game that they're playing here, and they're walking a tightrope, and they may actually succeed at it. Of course, they may not, too. We may thwart them. Who knows? Trump may win, and if he wins, this stuff will cease to happen, at least while he's in office, because he's not going to play into this game like the Democrats are. Notice that everything Joe Biden is doing is setting up for this very thing to occur. He started even before he's won. They haven't even voted on him yet. The Electoral College hasn't voted yet, and he's already put a cabinet together, and he's already holding meetings as the president. He should not be doing that, but he's trying to get this stuff done before Trump has a chance to win. So we'll see.
Who has priority for the limited amounts we do have? We both know countries are hoarding Extranavir.
Doctor, in my opinion, you are lost in the details. With enough money and political will, anything is possible. Let's get going on this now.
Thank you both for this extremely important discussion. Our U.S. affiliate has just released polling results on public expectations for a vaccine. A majority of Americans expect a vaccine to be available within 2 months, and 65% of those polled are eager to take the vaccine, even if it's experimental. In related news, a significant demand for personal protective equipment like N95 masks and gloves are on the rise due to the pandemic. However, globally, hospitals are running low. Additionally, other critical medical supplies such as saline and antibiotics are dwindling. Countries and companies are reportedly stockpiling supplies, disrupting healthcare supply chains, causing dangerous shortages in many parts of the world.
And finally, for the latest information on what we know about vaccines and this antiviral, here's medical countermeasure expert Matt Watson.
As we've just heard, there is no existing vaccine that appears effective against the newly discovered CAPS virus.
Probably in a rat.
Governments, scientists, and companies around the world have become working intensively to develop one, but it's highly unlikely that a vaccine could be developed, tested, manufactured, and distributed in less than a year.
But Trump did it in less than a year. We've got not one, but 2 vaccines coming out this month because of Operation Warp Speed, which they said could not happen. Trump did that, not Biden, not anybody else. Trump did that. Remember that when the vaccine is being offered. Now, for the interest of time, I'm going to skip ahead to another video. We'll pick up on this one if you want to get back into it later. But I want to show you what happens to a society when they set it up the way that we are set up right now. You have to understand that this has been going on since the early 80s. They have been shifting society into a specific way by teaching children certain indoctrinations in school, by setting up workplaces to be in cubicles and taking away identities and things like the American Patriot Act, taking away your rights, surveillance, censorship. All of these things are coming into play from different sources, and it's like reading a script. Yes, it is. And you're talking about this video, they are reading a script. This is a game. This isn't real life. This is something they put together to practice. It's a practice game. And now we're doing it for real in COVID-19. So now I'm going to jump over to the society portion, and we're going to watch a video called The Great Mouse-topia Experiments. Pardon the quality, this was done in the 70s, but it's very poignant as to what the world is doing right now.
Dr. Calhoun wanted to find out what would happen to a mouse colony given everything mice need except living space. The result was chilling. 2.5 years ago, more than 1,000 mice were packed into Mouse City. Today, a tiny handful of survivors huddles in one corner of the city. Dr. Calhoun explains what the overcrowding did to Mouse City's inhabitants.
The last 1,000 animals born never learned to develop the social behavior. They never learned to be aggressive, which is necessary in defense of home sites. They never learned to court. There was no mating. Being no mating, there were no progeny. And the older animals, whose behavior was already becoming disrupted, they eventually at age too old to reproduce.
Now, this is what happens when you raise a generation without fathers, a generation raised by women, where you give them participation trophies and you nerf everything and you make it where they can't even ride a bicycle without wearing a helmet. And when you get a trophy for just showing up, whether you did anything or not, where nobody's allowed to fail, where bullies are extinguished from the society, because that's what happens. And now you've got a society of people who don't mate, they have no gender, they have no ambition, they don't try to do anything, they're just there until they die. That's the very beginning of the end of a civilization.
So it was all left up to these last 1,000 or so, who we call the beautiful ones, because not engaging in any stressful activity.
They call them the beautiful ones. The last mice that survive are called the beautiful ones because they stop interacting with all the other mice and they spend all of their time alone grooming themselves, making their fur real shiny, and they get fat and they get self-absorbed and they don't have any gender and they don't have any ambition and they don't try to do anything. They don't hunt for food. They just sit there looking at themselves in the mirror and grooming themselves. That's the last to survive when put in a cage like we're in this society.
And only paying attention to themselves, they groom themselves well, so they look very fine specimens. But from that point on, which was about the time that you were here 2.5 years ago, reproduction totally ceased, and the animals have just aged and died.
Perhaps the most chilling conclusion from his Mouse City studies, says Dr. Calhoun, is that once this change in social behavior occurs, it apparently cannot be reversed.
Once this happens, once society goes over that line and they begin to become androgynous and they begin to change the script, they begin to go opposite of what their nature is, you cannot undo it. That is the end of the civilization. Then Rome falls.
Fact, of apparent irreversible phase shifts that give some of us a particular concern over the fate of the human situation, because we see worldwide the breaking down of social roles, the increase in contact as a result of the breakdown of the social roles.
That's when you destroy the nuclear family and take the father out of the picture. When you destroy social roles like men protect the women and the women make the home. That's a social role. When boys dress like football players and girls dress like ballerinas, that's a social role. When men do the work in the workforce and the women stay home and make a family, that's a social role. And when these things begin to break down, when people stop trying to live in a harmonious society where everybody has a job to do, then the society begins to fall apart and degrade to the point of collapse.
Too many people, that this might lead to an overriding of our controls, of our total culture, and would be set into a process which would either fix us rigidly forever into some sort of global tribalism.
Fix us rigidly forever into global tribalism. That's one world government. That's one monetary system. That's what happens when you put too many people from too many different places in one small area and do not allow them to be individuals. That's what happens when you give participation trophies. That's what happens when you don't allow people to stand up for themselves or to fight for their rights. When you take God out of everything and make them believe in the state because there's no higher power. When you tell children that they're animals and that they evolved from mouse or from some monkey and that nobody is in control because of evolution. It's all random chance. Your life has no meaning. When people start believing that, they fixate into a rigid social control led by their overlords until the society collapses.
Without any adaptation to change, or that would result
yes,
eventually some decline very much.
No alphas? That means everyone's a beta.
Like we've seen here, but that postpones something.
Dr. Calhoun, why do we have to make decisions now on our population control?
Well, the population's a very interesting one. There's a lot of talk about a population explosion. Well, there's no population explosion, at least not quite yet. There never has been, or might say there's always been a population explosion. If we go back to about 40,000 years ago, there were perhaps 4.5 million people on Earth, and it had been not many fewer than this for the previous 2 million years of man's evolution. And then suddenly the numbers began to increase, and perhaps a little crude drawing here will
Yeah, that suddenly is at the point of when the people got off of the ark and started having babies again. See, the earth isn't 40,000 years old, at least mankind isn't. It's about 4,500 years old. And at that point, you can trace DNA back to a bottleneck where there was only about 8 people. And those people, if you do the math, it takes about 5,000 years to get up to 6.5, 7 billion people, according to how people have children and according to the lifespans that they lived in those days. So that's about how old that we are. And before that, there was a society that was probably bigger than the one that's here now. And they all died in the flood. They don't like to talk about that part. They say that, well, at one point, population started to explode. And before that, we just kind of had babies every now and then. No, that's not what happened.
Show this. These are in millions now. And this is 1, 10, 100 million, 1 billion, and we go up above here.
People, not years.
Take a time scale here, an inverse log. If we go back to 100,000 years ago,
or 1,000 years ago,
make this then to 10,000 years ago,
2,000 years,
years ago,
3 and 4.
So these are in time.
in thousands of years. And if we look at population growth in this way, starting back about 40,000 years ago, population starting at about here has gone roughly along this direction. Now, this is a rather complex curve. It's of unfortunate.
For those of you watching, that means up. Now, he's adding zeros. His math is not right as far as the timeline goes, but the way he breaks it down is right according to how population grows.
Curve, but simply said, starting here at 40,000 years ago, it took about 20,000 years, about 20,000 years for the population to double. Then the next doubling required about 10,000 years. Then each doubling, 5,000 years for the next doubling.
What did you learn, April? And I like shepherd's pie too, by the way. I'm hammered and eating a shepherd's pie. I'm probably making a mess. Well, shepherd's pie is good and it's supposed to be messy. What did you learn something new, April? Are you talking about this, or are you talking about something besides this? Because I'm going to show you a few more things before this podcast ends tonight. Let me continue with the Rat Man while you explain.
2,500 and so on.
What doubling are we in now, Doctor?
We're in the 10th doubling and the 11th doubling.
Is that the final one?
Well, pretty near. It might be. The final doubling.
Notice he said the final doubling. That means the end of civilization.
Starting shortly after the next, at which the world population might be of the order of 4.5 billion now people.
Well, we're at 7 billion now, so you're a little behind the times, but you get the idea.
Only 20 years to double. So starting from 20,000 years for the first doubling up to about 20 years if this historical process continues. Now, so that we're back here a little ways from that, not very far from early in the next century.
Now, you see, if nobody messes with anything, population will continue to double every 20 years or so, 25 years or so. There's plenty of room on the earth. We're not in any danger of running out. You can fit all 7 billion people on the planet Earth in Dallas, Texas, with a foot square to their person. They can stand in a 1 foot square, and all 7 billion people can fit in Dallas, Texas. We are in no danger of running out of space. The reason we're running out of space is because everybody is collecting on the coasts. If they spread out, we'll be fine. But you see, things like this pandemic and things like social control, they are trying to stave off the population growth. It says so on the Georgia Guidestones. They want to keep population around 50,000 people. 50,000. There's 7 billion of us here now. They want to knock it down to 50,000. I don't think they're going to get there in our lifetimes, but that's the plan. That's what they're trying to do. The only hope is for righteousness to dominate, for good people to get in office and shut it down. Because if the wrong people stay in office, things like this will keep getting ever so closer to happening. They inch closer and closer every year.
Mathematically projected, Doctor, on a calendar year perhaps, when the population reaches the point where it outstrips our natural resources, our power supplies, our food supply?
If this trend continued, you would have instantaneous doubling. Well, we know that's impossible.
No.
And that's the critical question, is that something is going to...
No, just because a child is born does not ensure that someone else dies. That's not how it works. How it works is that God created a finite number of souls. I don't know how many. I would say probably 12 billion. I don't know. I have no idea. I'm guessing. We've got 6 billion or 7 billion on the planet right now. At some point, all of the souls will be born. And when that happens, babies will stop being born. Or maybe they'll still be born, but they won't have souls. I don't know how that works. But what I do know is that God only created a certain number. He created them all at once. In Genesis, when it says he created the hosts, that's who he's talking about. All the people, all the angels, all of the living things were all created at once in 6 days. Now, after that, they began to start being born into flesh. The first being in the group of Adam and Eve. Not the first people, but the first of the Adamic race. The first people were already here on the 6th day. So, I don't know how many people that was. I don't know how many people he created, but they've been there. They were here long enough to build cities in 20 years. So, I'm guessing they were probably here for 100 years. Maybe. I don't know. This is all conjecture because it doesn't clearly state it. There's no actual documentation of it. But the fact that they were here, and then the Adamic race was created, and then that went off into the 12 tribes, which were the people who survived the flood, along with whoever else they could get on the boat. And that's the people we have here today. Now, right now we're at about 7 billion people. That number will probably change over the next 50 years. It may even double. I don't know. I have no idea how many souls there are, but we're not that far from the end, so we can't go much further. That's insane. Yes, but I feel this was the plan anyways. Yeah, it probably is. Like I said, if you read the back of the Bible, then you know things are going to go bad. They have to. It's part of the plan. We're going to go through a bad period of tribulation and out-of-control governments and persecution and all kinds of things. I'm just reporting to you that this is how it's happening. But it's going to happen one way or another. There's nothing anyone can do about that. This is just the direction it's taking. And this mouse utopia experiments explains what happens to a society when you put too much control on it. When you take away their freedom. When you take away their individuality. They become androgynous. They become gender spliced, you know, anamorphic things that have no identity. And that's what's happening in the world today. You can see it in our young population. It's going to get worse until it ends. Okay, heard I just hear it as Jesus gives and he takes. That's correct. All right, let's continue.
To happen.
Got about
Man
10 minutes
will be
left.
Different from the start of man, and this is where man started about 40,000 years ago as a cultural animal, not as a biological animal. He went considerably back in time below that. But at beginning this new process when he, quote, now was the only animal who could really control his numbers, that is enlarging them, which is increasing his own potentiality by so doing. And this has continued until now we hit a critical point here where this process can't continue. And so from this time 40,000 years ago to early in the next century defines what we call man. And man ends at this point, whether there are a lot of bodies around, he's going to have to be something quite different from what he has been historically. And so one thing that he could do, and we're certainly capable of doing, is keep reproducing. So that's one choice. And another choice that we have, which will have to be in effect by early in the next century, is that he can stabilize the population. That is, one, he can keep going not very much longer.
Notice how he thinks he can control the population of mankind by stabilizing it, you know, like with a pandemic or something, or maybe some Georgia Guidestones being enacted. Stabilize mankind. You can't stabilize something you don't control. But that's what scientists think. That's the reason we're in the situation we're in, is because scientists stopped just looking for answers and started trying to manufacture answers. And now they're trying to control the outcome. And you cannot control an equal outcome. It's going to happen whether you like it or not. No matter what you do. You can control how they feel about it, but you can't control what's going to happen.
It's sort of doubled to 9 billion. But if this is the end point, if we if the number of children per adults continues as it's been in the past, there would be about 9 billion people at this point. If we begin slowing down so that the population can stabilize, which is the ecological model as we've tried to do for wildlife management, to maintain a stable population, then with fewer children, we might keep at this level, we have 7.5 billion. Now the critical point here is how many adults. Ideally, there should be, at this upper optimum, 3.5 billion adults in order to make most effective the network of people communicating with people. However, if we go on there's a third choice, and this is the population will begin slowly to decline. And if we go towards that goal, we would have at that point roughly about 6.3 billion total people, with considerably less than 2 children per family.
Doctor, what do you think now of the stress on environmental problems, trying to solve them? Should government, the politicians, pay more attention to this problem? They're all interlaced. It isn't that simple.
Well, the problem with the environment is just one problem which we're focused on now, and this may be a real trap because we only look at physical, biological.
Yeah, you think government can control this? You think government should get involved? No. You screw with Mother Nature, and Mother Nature will screw back with you.
Logical aspects of our surroundings, where if we focused instead on what is much more essential, comprehensive problem, and this is evolution and the designing of evolution.
Now, if you think that I'm not telling you the truth here, just look back into ancient civilizations such as Sumeria or Egypt or Rome, and you will find out that very similar things occurred in all three of those civilizations just before they fell. You'll find out that men started dressing like women and women like men. You'll find out that they started gorging themselves with food and not working. They stopped pulling themselves up by their bootstraps. They engaged in gladiatorial behavior. They let politics take over. The Senate was in big control. The Caesar was doing all kinds of crazy things back then. It just keeps happening over and over and over again. And every time it does, civilization falls. So what I'm telling you, just like with those ancient civilizations, if Jesus don't come back, we'll start over again and do something else later on down the road. But this civilization is on the verge of falling. Won't be much longer now. They took our beautiful lightning bugs and roly-polies. What are you talking about? We still have lightning bugs and roly-polies. Or are you talking about the love bug? You know those little bugs that get all over your car there in Florida that look like they have a body on both ends? Those are man-made. Those were made in a laboratory. They're not nature. They were designed to combat the mosquito population, and instead they just ballooned out of control, and now they're everywhere in Florida. It's going to be like the glue traps we get for rats. Kind of, sort of, yeah. I could see that. Yes, I Rembrandt. Huh? Oh, you remember. Spell check. I got you.
And in fact, we like to say that we are revolutionists here, but a particular kind of revolutionist, but you now spell differently. Now, we all know what this symbol is. This is prescription.
RX. Drugs.
So we're concerned with prescription for evolution, of the design of the future, the design of evolution. So we're revolutionists.
You cannot design evolution because evolution has never occurred. The only thing is microevolution, which is natural selection due to circumstances and environments that occurs. The changing from one species to another has never been observed. It does not occur. This is a false religion designed to take your eye off of God. That is the reason all of this is happening now.
Doctor, why are we falling into a trap paying so much attention to environment?
Well, we are in an environmental crisis. There's no
Imagine that.
question about it. The concern of the government in this question is good. The even greater concern, particularly at the college level, in the environmental teach-ins that are underway during April of this year, are extremely good movements, but they may be a very deathly trap. For this reason, that is, if we can focus just on the good environment, the biological environment, the physical environment, we will miss a great deal of what man is or could be with a concern for increasing human potentiality. And again, we like to say we'd like to put mental as the human capacity back.
You cannot change human potential. They are going to be what they are. You cannot engineer it. If you try, you will end up creating a situation that will end just like your mouse experiments do.
Back in environmental. And this is what we're all about. And
this is what we're all about, he says. Mental and environmental.
Set a trap. See, the trap we're setting here is we're looking at the environment on a strictly biological model and not a man, future evolutionary.
Notice he said he was setting a trap. His words couldn't be more prophetic.
Directed model is that we can develop a stable population in which everything becomes fixed, be unchanging over time, and now we'll be back in a global tribal situation. Sure, we might survive for millions of years, but we aren't going anywhere. We're like the lungfish in Lake Manyara, who are in this same situation. They've handled it very effectively. Whenever stresses come along, they encapsulate themselves in a mud ball and wait out the dry period, and then come back when the environment's back in a suitable condition. So we could become lungfish, and evolution would essentially end.
No, we cannot. What we'll do is die. We're not lungfish. We can't encapsulate ourselves in a mud ball and wait for things to get better again. You ruin the country, you ruin the society we live in, and we will die right along with it. That's the truth of the matter. All right. It's 10 o'clock. I'll leave it up to you guys if you want me to keep going or not. The essential information has been imparted. You know what I'm trying to say. But if you want me to conclude all of this, we'll keep going. Or we can stop here and start over Friday. Start where we left off. It's up to you. By the way, April, I would like for you to give Kevin a message for me, please. 2 times he has asked me to look into something, and 2 times I have spent my time doing so, and both times he was not here when I presented it. I will work for you. That's my job. Anything you want to know, you can ask, and I will go find the answers to it for you. But I need you here to watch it. That's the reason I'm doing it. This took a lot of research to put all this together. I wanted him to see it, because that's what he was interested in. So what say you? You want me to keep playing this video, or you want to pick up where we leave off Friday? Because I've got 2 other documents to show you that go along with this to get into the Great Reset, which is coming, which is where they're going to reset the monetary system and the government system, and they're going to bring in a religion system that is a one-world religion. And they're going to do away with all the separate little religions. Have Guy ever heard of Blue Beam Project? Also a red and the X that marks the sky. Yes, I've heard of Project Blue Beam. And no, there are no such thing as aliens. I don't doubt that there's something out there, but they are not aliens from another world. They are fallen angels from this world. Chemtrails, yep, poisoning our crops and killing us. Well, it's not really that severe. They are doing it, but they're doing it for the purposes of controlling weather, and it has an adverse effect on people because what they're doing is seeding the sky with aluminum oxide and other things to cause weather patterns. You'll also notice that it isn't happening as much right now as it was in the 90s. You hardly ever see it anymore. It's because too many people are looking up. They're taking a break. Yep, he is a pud. He's asleep. Well, you make sure you tell him that I went and worked for him, and I did the research, and I found the answers to his question, and then I answered them, and he wasn't here to hear it. Oh, me too. I had a tough day too. But what I want to do, this is one of the things I'm trying to do. Sunday and Monday is about the Bible. Wednesday and Friday, I want it to be about the people that watch the podcast. I'm trying to set up an interactive show where if you have a question, you ask me because I have nothing but time. You may not have the time to find the answers you need, but I do. And you can trust me to find them correctly and to give you good answers. So I'm trying to set up an interactive show where the people watching can inquire and I will deliver the answers. Whatever that may be, it doesn't matter. Do you? Okay, well, let's. Do you? Okay, well, let's. I'm assuming you're answering, you want to start back Friday instead of continuing. That's what it's doing. I'm trying, anyway. Okay. Let's go back to, please like, subscribe, and share. Press that bell icon so you'll get notifications of when I'm going to be here. Also, leave a comment down below. Let me know what you're thinking. Challenge me, question me, curse me, bless me. Whatever you want to do. Ask yourself a question and then answer it. Whatever. Share the video. Give it to somebody you like. Give it to somebody you hate. Give it to somebody you're indifferent to. You never know what could happen. But if you'd like to support what I'm doing and you like what I'm doing, go to paypal.me/JakeJohnsonBand. Every little bit helps, and I greatly appreciate it. And with that, it's 10 o'clock, so I'm going to go ahead on and bolt and watch some news. And we will continue this discussion on Friday. I love you very much. I hope you had a good time. Great Sky Troll, thanks for hanging. April, thanks for hanging. Tell Kev I missed him. And kiss your mama for me. Is there anything you would like to discuss before I get out of here? Oh, and by the way, most importantly, happy Thanksgiving. I pray that God blesses you and your family. And I hope you have a great day tomorrow. Please don't listen to the government and go see your family. That's what we're here for. If you can't have love and you can't have family, then what are we fighting for? That's the point. So be sure and go see your family. And be thankful for all the good things we do have. Okay, that is awesome. No problem. None at all. Typos are part of the game, and I'm trying to learn how to translate them. Yep, we'll start back Friday, where I will get into the Great Reset. We've already covered the reason why the Great Reset is going to happen and the leading up to it. And then we'll get into what's going to come in the near future if certain people get into power like they're trying to right now. I got a lot to do for tomorrow. I bet you do. I'm kind of grateful that I don't have so much to do tomorrow because I don't have anybody to cook for. But my sister is going nuts right now, probably in the kitchen as we speak. She might even be listening to the podcast. There's 2 or 3 people listening that haven't spoke. And one of them is still here. I love you too. Have a great night. I will see you Friday. Thanks for watching.